Today we publish a white paper on immigration, a strategy absolutely central to my plan for change that will finally take back control of our borders. Between 2019 and 2023, net migration quadrupled until in 2023 it reached nearly 1 million. That's about the population of Birmingham, our second largest city. That's not control, it's chaos. A one-nation experiment in open borders.
Keir Starmer thought he was walking into a polite debate until Ant Middleton showed up like a human wrecking ball with a beard. 1 minute Starmer was talking about policies, the next he was spiritually evicted from the room. Ant didn't just destroy him, he turned him into political confetti. What triggered this verbal grenade? And why does Starmer now flinch every time someone says sass? Stick around because this takedown is messier than Boris Johnson's hair in a hurricane.
Well, what do I know about politics? I know enough about modern day politics to realise that it's not working here in the UK. Hence, the solution is in the title, reform. Political reform is definitely needed, and it doesn't take the brains of Elon Musk to realise that. What do I know? Now, I do know about national security. I do know about safety. I do know about personal safety. I do know about community. I do know about teamwork.
It started like any other quiet week in the political swamp, where Keir Starmer was somewhere, probably ironing another beige tie and mastering the ancient art of not making a decision. Then, from the distance, came the sound of combat boots stomping over empty promises. Ant Middleton had entered the chat, and someone was about to get absolutely shredded.
But listen, what I do know is national security, and that's what we're going to touch on very first and foremost. Now, when I spoke to Nigel and the wider team a couple of years ago, for those that don't know, I do a TV show called SAS, Who Dares Wins, where I bring in broken people and I strip them down so they can identify who they are, so they have an identity, and then I build them back up to go out into the world and to achieve. And I got asked a question by Nigel and his wider team saying, could you do that with a broken country? How do you do that? And we went through how I broke people down.
For those blissfully unaware, Ant Middleton isn't your average social media ranter. This is a guy who's climbed mountains, led elite military units into life or death missions, and somehow survived British reality TV without punching a producer. When he talks leadership, he doesn't mean politely reshuffling a committee. He means dragging your broken leg across a battlefield because quitting isn't in your vocabulary. So, naturally, when this ex-Special Forces juggernaut looked over the landscape of British politics and saw Keir Starmer blinking awkwardly into the void, he had thoughts. Very loud, very pointed, very military-grade thoughts.
Lost my identity. I got confused. When you have a nation of confused people, guess what happens after? Frustration. You get frustrated. Like the individual, very much like the individual. What happens after frustration? Anger. Anger, violence. Violence. What's happening on our streets right now? Violence. Or it teeters into civil unrest, which we want to avoid at all costs.
To say Ant went easy would be like saying Starmer occasionally finds a backbone. No, this was less a critique and more a heat-seeking missile aimed at the moist sponge cake that is Labour's top man. Ant didn't just question Starmer's leadership, he eviscerated it, drop-kicked it into a trench, and then yelled at it for being late to basic training.
I'm not going to avoid any taxes. I'm going to come away from the way that he runs the country. He's got no ambition, he's got no drive, and he's just off-putting. I'm going to spend my time between Dubai and Spain. You know, I'm not going there to try and save money. I won't have an income coming from the UK, so you know I don't need to be here. And
what is it about? But Labour have only been in for I think 2 months. So what have they done so catastrophically wrong?
Well, you're talking about the next budget of what they're going to start rising.
Let's backtrack for a second, because understanding the force of this takedown requires knowing what Starmer brings to the leadership table. Spoiler alert, it's not leadership. This is the man who approached Brexit like someone trying to order a tapas bar with commitment issues. He has turned U-turns into performance art. One minute he's pro-nationalisation, the next minute he's watering it down like a cheap cocktail in a dry wedding. Ask him a direct question and you'll get a 14-minute dissertation that ends with, "We're exploring options." But Middleton doesn't explore options, he executes plans. He's not here for your political theatre, your grey-suited dithering, or your very serious tone while achieving nothing. So when Ant let loose, it wasn't just some angry man with a beard. It was an indictment. It was a punchline with boots, and oh, the delivery. Ant practically carved Starmer a new political personality, using nothing but sheer disdain and gym-honed intensity. He painted the Labour leader as the kind of bloke who, if dropped into a military operation, would spend 45 minutes forming a committee to name the mission, then retreat when the enemy showed up with mean tweets. Leadership, Middleton reminded the world, is about standing tall when everything's collapsing, not politely adjusting your lapel pin while polling your advisors.
You get abused on a regular basis, and I see it on a regular basis, and it infuriates me.
And you have that split second of, am I going to act? Am I not going to act? And that delay is what people see.
Does politics influence the police force?
That's a really good question, because I'm just a lowly DS, you know,
Yeah,
on CID.
listen, you can't hide here, Mark. Come on, I know you know more.
The media it makes the police and it breaks the police.
Yes, there's going to be bad apples. There always is in any organisation. Yes, we're going to make mistakes. We're only human.
People see that tip of the iceberg.
Yep.
They don't.
The internet reacted the way you'd expect, with utter joy and enough means to fuel the next 4 elections. Starmer being destroyed by Middleton wasn't just funny, it was necessary. It was the verbal defibrillator Britain didn't know it needed. Suddenly, TikTok was flooded with videos of Ant's blunt truths layered over footage of Starmer blinking, like he'd just lost his place in a game of political charades. Twitter rebranded itself briefly as an Ant Middleton fan club. Even people who hadn't paid attention to politics since Tony Blair's hair was a national obsession were suddenly asking, wait, why is this guy in charge of anything? Because let's be honest, Starmer has all the inspirational power of a middle manager at a stationery convention. He approaches every crisis like he's apologising for a late invoice. And here comes Ant Middleton, all intensity and clarity, basically pointing out that Britain's so-called alternative leader couldn't lead a dog through a park without second-guessing the leash. The contrast was jarring. One of them, Middleton, has literally led men into situations where a wrong move means someone doesn't go home.
Today was Sir Keir Starmer's worst day as Prime Minister. He's currently so toxic that polonium looks at him and runs away. The latest poll put Reform about 10 points ahead, and he's lost the red wall. So his team of crack advisors said, go to the red wall, win them back, slag off Nigel Farage. They'll love that, Sir Keir. Here's what happened.
I've got Peter from The Guardian.
Do you think one of the problems is that Nigel Farage can approximate talking like a human being, where you just resort to talking points and dodging questions?
He's lost The Guardian.
The other, Starmer gets flustered if someone asks whether he supports striking nurses. Middleton's point wasn't just about Starmer's political stances, or lack thereof. It was about the terrifying absence of conviction. Leadership without guts, direction without purpose, politics without a pulse. It hit hard because it was true. Britain isn't just tired of scandals and sleaze, it's exhausted by nothingness. The vague slogans, the tepid statements, the corporate-style answers to human problems. When Ant Middleton thundered in with a verbal roundhouse kick to the solar plexus of mediocrity, people stood up and cheered, figuratively and literally. Suddenly, people were revisiting Starmer's greatest non-hits. That time he sort of kind of back strikes until someone important looked unhappy. That green policy announcement that came and went like a ghost on holiday. His ongoing commitment to being all things to all people, which usually results in being precisely nothing to everyone.
Boris Johnson had more of a quite a Johnsonian response. He did quite a long post on X, but I think the most intriguing part of that was, to take care is the orange ball chewing manacled gimp of Brussels.
The orange ball chewing.
Orange ball chewing, manacled gimp of Brussels is how he described Keir Starmer. He said, most bizarrely of all, he's agreed that Britain will once again be paying countless millions of pounds into EU coffers for the privilege of becoming the non-voting punk of the EU Commission.
It's a great sentence. You've got to give it to him.
He's got away with words.
Means depicted him as a ghost, a mannequin, even a cardboard cutout with a 404 error on its forehead. Ant Middleton wasn't just mocking a man, he was exposing the vacuum at the heart of Her Majesty's most hesitant opposition. What makes this roast even more poetic is that Middleton has never claimed to be a politician. He's not polished, and thank goodness. He speaks like someone who's seen real stakes, not someone trying to keep donors comfortable. He's blunt, often brash, but deeply authentic, and in today's politics, authenticity is rarer than a Starmer campaign promise that lasts a full news cycle. The beauty of it all is how completely outgunned Starmer looked without even being in the room. Ant Middleton dropping his opinion was like tossing a grenade into a council meeting about the font on Labour posters. Even die-hard centrists had to admit Starmer looked soft, not just because of what was said, but because of what wasn't. There was no strength, no passion, no sense that the man could handle anything tougher than a light grilling on breakfast television. And in the vacuum, Middleton's every word echoed louder.
And then I got a phone call from my agency saying, Ant, your whole world's about to turn upside down in about 45 minutes to an hour. I said, what do you mean? And then that 45 minutes, an hour came around. The Sun, the Mirror, the Daily Mail, all had these in place, promptu sort of articles coming out. Ant Middleton's been fired by Channel 4. Ant Middleton, fired because of BLM tweet. Ant Middleton fired because of teen tweet, pandemic tweet. That's what it was all about, first of all.
The real sting wasn't the insults. It was the implication that Keir Starmer couldn't lead a squad of toddlers across a soft play area without requesting a 5-point plan and holding a stakeholder meeting halfway through. Middleton wasn't just pointing out flaws. He was describing the precise type of leader people are desperate to escape. Calculated, cautious, vanilla with a hint of beige. And it wasn't just a roasting, it became a rallying cry. People began asking, out loud, what kind of leadership they actually wanted. Did they want a speech generator that looks like it fell out of an HR seminar? Or did they want someone who'd take responsibility, own their decisions and actually lead? And that's where Ant Middleton's verbal dropkick to Starmer's dignity takes a sharp left turn into something much bigger. This wasn't just some celebrity squawking off on a talk show. No, this was a reflection of a nationwide midlife crisis. Britain isn't just tired, it's politically burnt out, emotionally unshowered, and pacing the kitchen at 2 a.m. wondering how we ended up with leaders who couldn't motivate a toddler to finish a juice box, let alone steer a country.
If you'd have asked me, 12 months, 2 years ago perhaps, about Keir Starmer, remember I've been a Labour MP, I've met Keir a couple of times, and I've chatted with him, etc. And I would have said 2 years ago, fairly decent guy, bit to the left for me, but not a bad guy. But now, having seen what's happened since he came to power, I have never been more disappointed. And for him to use the word principles, I think is rich coming from Keir Starmer. I mean, the hypocrisy from all of this, we had to listen to his sanctimonious...
Middleton's outburst tapped into something raw, something millions of people have mumbled into their steering wheels during rush hour. Is anyone in charge actually capable? You see, while politicians hold press conferences and try not to sweat on live TV, Ant Middleton has literally walked through enemy territory in pitch-black silence, leading men who trusted him with their lives. So when he looks at Starmer and says, yeah, that bloke couldn't lead ants to a picnic, people feel it in their spine. The issue isn't left or right, it's not Labour or Conservative, it's that both sides seem to be staffed by human filing cabinets. Neatly organised, impossible to emotionally connect with, and only useful once a year. Voters don't want a spreadsheet in a suit. And that authenticity, however gritty, is something that cuts through the posh school fog that clouds Westminster. Whether or not you'd ever vote for the man, he's got what most MPs lack. Conviction, that wasn't sold to him in a focus group.
Reform UK say you're running scared of them, that you're sounding increasingly like them with some of the policies and announcements you've made recently. This is a speech that was very defensive, wasn't it?
He's lost Sky News.
Let me go to Chris Hope. Chris
Hope, GB News. Prime Minister Nigel Farage has 5 MPs. You've got 403. Are you panicking because Reform is so far ahead in the polls, it seems? Is he living rent-free in your brain? You went to a state school. Your dad worked in a factory. Your mum worked in the NHS. So why has a public school-educated former city trader got more in common with the Red Wall than you have?
He's got Nigel Farage living rent-free in his head, and just in case he wasn't absolutely sure, he's being told how unpopular he is.
That's why this hit so hard, because for once, it didn't feel like another personality clash between political tribes. It felt like a soldier shouting into a vacuum of dithering bureaucrats, demanding someone, anyone, show some backbone before the whole damn country falls over itself in committee meetings. Middleton didn't destroy Starmer with stats or policies. He did it by exposing the hollowness behind the haircut. And the nation noticed. Because here's the truth. In an actual crisis, we don't need someone to waffle on about further inquiries or looking into the matter. We need someone who can stand in front of a room and say, "Follow me," and have people believe it. Middleton's message was clear. Leadership isn't polished. It's earned. The question isn't whether he can talk the talk, but whether anyone would actually follow him if things got real. Middleton may not wear a tie, but he wears his integrity like body armour. You might not like everything he says, but you know he means it. And in an era of political beige, that's almost revolutionary.
Do you think we live in an island of strangers?
I think our country has benefited over very many years through generations from people coming to the UK, being part of our communities and working in our public services. But I also think that the level of migration needs to be controlled and managed, and it needs to come down.
So we are living in partial island of strangers then?
Well, I think we're a country that I think have a really strong country.
Are we or are we not an island of strangers, do you think?
No, I think we're a country where everybody, I think, wants to see.
So here's the final blow. If Keir Starmer's leadership style was a mission, Ant Middleton would have called it a failure in the first 5 minutes, barked at him to do 20 push-ups, and then led the rest of us through a firestorm with nothing but a compass and raw determination. And frankly, we'd probably follow him. He held up a mirror to Starmer and by extension to every polished, focus group tested politician who thinks voters can't tell the difference between real steel and political papier-mâché. The mirror said, "Here stands a man with no fire, no direction and no idea how to lead in a crisis. A man who approaches bold action like it might trigger a mild rash." No one needed to say it. Who has it? Who clearly doesn't? And while Ant Middleton probably went back to climbing glaciers or doing pull-ups on helicopters, his message lingered like an echo in Westminster. Get real or get out of the way. Starmer might still be the leader for now. But the moment Ant Middleton opened his mouth, people started asking the one question every politician dreads. Why are you even here?